Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session of Live at the Waterhole. It's me, Kenneth Gamble. I'll be your guide for the session. Happy Father's Day to everyone out there throughout the globe. And we've kicked off here at Victoria Falls. It's quite nice to see this camera. We tend to come here a bit more as the dry season approaches. A bit more action going on here. Of course, as always, the show is live and interactive, so please feel free to pop through your questions and comments. It's always wonderful to have some of the discussions we do have on the show, and I hope we're going to see quite a few interesting things today, as always. Sorry, I had to tweak something on my speakers, otherwise I can't hear the wonderful audio we get to hear. Quite pretty with all the impala around, the typical long-legged birds who, well, I did see an egret fly past. I think it's moving to the right, probably a great egret. Pretty sure I spy a grey heron off to the left, and of course a few marabou storks. One of my favorites. They are quite ugly, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I must say, it seems like quite a typical winter's day here at Victoria Falls, or dry season type weather. The bush is starting to convincingly dry out. I was in the Kruger Park a few times in the last week. I say it's actually still quite green, but you can see the winter or the dry season weather creeping in slowly but surely. I do think a lot of the late rain and water all over the show has delayed the drying out of the vegetation, but it is a blessing in a year like this. Wendell, you'd like to know, why do marabou storks appear like they have mange on their feathers? So of course that is just on the neck area. They look a bit scruffy. It does appear to be a bit of mange, but it's perfectly normal. Due to the fact that they are scavengers, they spend a lot of time feeding inside of carcasses, so having a bare head and neck helps keep them clean, exactly like vultures. One can imagine if you had feathers there, they would get dirty and be a source of disease and infection, and obviously birds spend a lot of time pruning themselves and preening their feathers, so can't afford to have that getting dirty. I think sometimes their body feathers also tend to look a bit ragged, but just due to the fact they are large birds that spend a lot more time in the sun compared to a few of your other smaller birds and their carcasses. But it certainly does not go a long way in making them look attractive. Anyway, we're going to move over to Tembe for a bit. There's some action waiting for us there. A few elephants on this fine Sunday. Always love watching the elephants being busy here at Tembe. I don't know if it's just me, but the waterhole seems quite full, or a bit more fuller than it normally appears. I don't know if it's just a certain section we're looking at, but it looks deceptively a lot fuller than I remember last time. We have been having a bit of rain sweeping through the country. I wouldn't say anything excessive or abnormal. Of course, the Cape has had a few floods, but I don't think northern Zululand has been affected at all by copious amounts of rain. Looks like two youngish bulls, but they are quite close to their peak. I'd say they're in their 20s or so, heading towards the 30s or late 20s. They're small, but they're no longer young fellows. A few more elephants coming in at the back there. Oh, I want to say that it appears like some cows. I do think it is a cow or two. Front one is a tuskless cow. That's very cool. This tuskless cow is actually collared, so honestly they're doing a bit of research on her movements. It would be interesting to know what specific information they're looking to gather from her activities. Very interesting. Was a bit distracted there. I had a picture of a tuskless cow I once saw in Tembe, and I wanted to compare if it was maybe this old girl, but the markings on the ears look quite different. Riley, you'd like to know what is the best thing about being on safari in the dry season? Put quite simply, the bush or the trees It's a bit more thinned out, so it's easier to see quite further, so that's your first advantage. And often as vegetation and water becomes quite scarce, but more specifically water being scarce, animals are drawn in from miles or kilometers around to come drink. So that's one way of finding and seeing lots. You stake out at a waterhole, but it almost guarantees activity. And of course, at the same time, with all that activity or game animals coming down to the waterhole, the big cats are inadvertently in the areas. Often in the dry season, it's quite normal to see lions hanging out around water sources, as it's a bit of a buffet for them. The animals come to them. But it's just I don't know. It's two very polarizing seasons. It is a bit tougher on the animals. Obviously, some of them get quite weak or die of starvation or thirst, so it can be a bit of a tough thing to witness. But it's a very good time of year for viewing big cats, etc. Mia, you would like to know, is the tuskless gene a dormant gene in female elephants? I was reading too quick. So not exactly. The tuskless trait isn't thought to be a simple dormant gene. It's present, or it sits hidden on all females, but it's a genetic trait that affects how the tusks develop in African elephant, and it's obviously, well, so far over the years they've realized it's much more common in females than males. It's almost never that you see a tuskless male. It's not very present at all. So yeah, it gets quite complex. I've read a little bit of the research, and it appears that it's linked to sex, which is probably the reason why we tend to see it expressed a lot more in cows than in males. But one thing that has stood out, in areas with intense ivory poaching, tuskless females became much more common, because elephants with large ivory were disproportionately removed from the population. In a way, that's a very good example of artificial selection, and it sped up the process. I do know in parts of Mozambique or some of the national parks that were affected during the Civil War, tuskless males have started to pop out in the population just from that intense poaching that took place. But I don't think it's a very common thing to appear. It's just, I think the effect humans have had on elephant populations has probably caused it to become a lot more prevalent than it ever naturally would have been. Magpie, you're asking, do I think not having tusks makes a female elephant less favorable for mating to males? So as far as it's known, there's no strong evidence that bull elephants avoid tuskless females when choosing mates. Male elephants seem to be much more focused on whether a female is an estrus and ready to breed. If anything, I would say the females tend to be a bit more picky with males, and I don't think tusk size at all plays a role in that. So yeah, it's quite interesting. But anyway, in fact, yeah, some populations where tusklessness became more common because of poaching, tuskless females continue to breed successfully. So that just indicates to you that males are just more focused on finding a receptive female than any other factors. And I think the Addo Elephant Park in South Africa is a good example of that. Tusklessness is quite prevalent there, but the population itself grows quite exponentially, or has grown quite a bit over the years. And that was even with the introduction of a few, for genetic diversity, they introduced a few elephants from Kruger into Addo, and that kind of moots that thought, I would say. Ooh, we are lucky. Quite a few elephants coming in at Tembe, and it's a lot of breeding herds coming in today. All the females coming to say Happy Father's Day to the big bull elephants. But no, it's quite nice to see a few more elephant demographics. Normally we are always quite overrun by the bull elephants here at Tembe. So it's quite nice to see a spread of all the elephant ages. That was actually the thought I wanted to come across, or come on to, when we were speaking about the tusklessness or preference with tusk sizes. There was a post I saw from a section ranger from the Kruger, where he was speaking about, in his experience, it's generally the younger elephant bulls in their 30s or round about that age size, that tend to have shorter, sharper or stubbier ivory, that tend to mate much more successfully compared to the large bulls that we are used to seeing with very large tusks. And it comes down to the fact with that shorter, stubbier, stronger ivory, they can fight a lot more aggressively and cause a bit more damage with those tusks than a bull with bigger tusks would be able to inflict or defend within a fight. So I think it's almost in a human sense, we appreciate large ivoried elephants and find it always is pretty. There's another word I'm looking for, but anyway, awe-inspiring, etc. But it actually just appears that bulls like that are almost pushed to the side when it comes to mating, and it tends to be the bulls with smaller ivory. Of course, you could argue if elephants were never poached to begin with, or hunted years ago for their ivory, much more of the population would have had bigger tusks. So you could maybe say it's also a causal effect that humans have had on the populations. And there is a strong school of thought that elephants over the years will probably develop smaller and smaller ivory, which would probably be good for them, and they would no longer be poached. Nathan, you are asking if there's ever been concerns that elephant genes are not spreading, and how would a situation like that be rectified? So, of course, it is always a concern for conservationists, and they do, or any conservationist or reserve managers, etc. It is a worry that elephant genes are not spread properly, and this is especially true in small isolated populations. Which tends to happen if populations are cut off by fences, habitat loss, or human development. Then these elephants end up breeding with a limited gene pool, which can reduce the genetic diversity over time. So it is a very real threat. I would say it's probably a bit more of an occurrence in South Africa, where we fence off our national parks. It cuts both ways. It protects the animals and helps reduce poaching, etc., and reduces human conflict, but it is also quite restrictive on the populations. So there has been a big move to try turn parks and to open bordered parks and allow the flow of animals. But yeah, so there's a big push for creating these wildlife corridors, quite a bit in the Eastern Cape. Large parts of the Kruger are open across its boundaries. It's only really on the high-density human areas where fences are erected to disreduce conflict. Yeah, it's actually quite amazing. I remember as a child visiting many parts of Southern Africa, and parks were quite small and limited, and now these areas and corridors have gotten quite large, but it's not an easy one to solve, even with a reserve that's not fenced in. It's still a challenge for the animals to move, but people are focusing and trying to encourage it. In smaller reserves, I would say there's a bit more of a human intervention. They'll maybe bring in a new bull, swap a bull out. Obviously, the use of contraceptives are used quite a bit also in smaller reserves, just to manage the population, so that at least the elephants are able to fulfill the ecological role without inducing ecological or irreversible ecological damage. So you'll probably find in those type of situations they can almost cherry pick carefully who or what genes are spread. But of course, not a simple or cheap program to run at all. But it is quite interesting. I know a lot of elephants that have been collared over the years. Truly fascinating to see how far they spread, or some of the areas they are willing to go to. I think young elephant bulls are, and that you could argue that's maybe nature's way of ensuring it, but they tend to travel very far from where they maybe initially grew up or were raised, and that in turn ensures quite a good spread of genetics throughout a population or area. I think a few years ago there was some young elephant bulls. I think they left south of Kruger, went down into southern Mozambique. I think they were on the border of Tembe, if I'm not mistaken, or they maybe went into Tembe for a day or two, and then from there they went up north into Swaziland. It's quite amazing because they were traveling through farmland, through habitated areas. But yeah, it was amazing to see their journey, and they carried on through Swaziland. At some of the game parks there, obviously they were able to detect elephants there. They just couldn't get into those areas. And then eventually returning all the way back to southern Kruger, where they were met with a fence. But there was a large operation to dart them and get them back into the park, and they were relocated to the far north to avoid a similar situation. But anyway, we're going to head over to Rosie's pan and see what's going on there. Our ever-present tree squirrels. A bit of wonderful alarm calling going on there. Any one that spent a bit of time in the low felt knows that sound is, or that alarm call of the squirrel is a world of possibilities. It could be a big cat, it could be a bird of prey, it could be a snake. It's quite an exciting call to hear, and it can lead you to seeing some interesting things. Just a bit hard to always pinpoint it. The squirrels look in the general area, they don't zone in it too well, so you always have to be careful that you don't walk into the danger itself. It would be quite amazing if there was a big cat here, but I'm sure it's maybe a bird of prey or a snake slinking around. But no, you never know.
We're going to be witnessing the relocation of a female cheetah that was born right here in Welgevonden Game Reserve. She's been moved to Lapalala Wilderness.
Would you like to know what an elephant's favourite food is? You could ask me questions like that in real time. Our safaris are live and interactive from the heart of Africa. Over here. Watch Safari Live and connect with nature.
The Explorer Chat is a magnificent way to make new friends who share your interest in nature. As an explorer, you'll also get your very own dashboard and personalized profile, plus the ability to save and share your favorite wildlife incidents with our brand new Safari Screenshots feature. Share sightings, swap stories, and experience nature together with people who feel the same pull to the wild as you do. Wild Earth Explorers, wilder together. We know that adverts pay our bills, but you don't necessarily like them. So, this is a fantastic way to stop being interrupted. Sign up today and you'll get instant access to wildlife. 24/7, ad-free, live and on demand. No pesky commercials, no rude interruptions, just wild Africa exactly as it unfolds. Wild Earth Explorers, wilder together.
Broke through the pectoral fins, broke through its throat, and then it choked. But I'm sure this fellow will get it down. They do tend to swallow in this very specific direction, so that it does go down quite easily. Ollie, you'd like to know if the intensity of an alarm call lets you know if a predator is close or if the alarm call is serious. My way of taking, or the intensity of the seriousness of it, is the number of animals alarm calling and the number of other species alarm calling. That kind of gives you a good idea. If it's just birds alarm calling, then it tends to be something that the birds are concerned with. Often you'll hear a few birds alarm calling, and that will lead you to finding maybe a snake in the tree. If the squirrels are alarm calling, the birds are alarm calling, and you start hearing maybe other animals alarm calling, then there's a very good chance it's a big cat. Obviously an impala is not going to alarm call about a bird of prey or a snake, but generally a combination of those factors. I do find also your ground dwelling birds, guinea fowl, they tend to make a bit more noise if a big cat's around, but once again they will do the same with a snake or a bird of prey. So I think if you're hearing quite a few different species alarm calling, it's a good it's a good indicator that it something is afoot, and more than likely a big cat. But I think if one is interested in nature, you're bound to find something interesting. I've often found quite a few birds of prey around my house like that, so it's always exciting to try see it. But more concerning when it's a snake, because when you're looking around and the snake could be a few feet from you, it's probably not the best surprise to get. Birds are still on their fishing mission. I wonder if that egret has managed to swallow its meal. It's a bit deceptive with the wind blowing. These feathers are a little puffed up. We just pop back over to Tembe. Obviously we lost visual of those birds. Still quite a bit of festivities and activities going on here. You can see that breeding herd has come a bit closer, or the other side of the pan. You can see the tuskless cow is ever watchful. I'm sure there will be some elephant bulls trailing this herd or trying their luck. Hear the telltale signs or sounds of a tree being beaten up. I always love the crack of a tree, and you know elephants are lurking nearby. Sometimes a bit of a surprising sound to hear when you're out camping in the bush. There's quite a bit of tomfoolery going on with these younger bulls here. Busy testing their strength on one another. Something got those young animals rushing out of there. Don't know if they got a fright or someone did something. It was quite interesting to see the reaction from the older animal there. It was almost as if, what have you done now? And a bit of concern, but doesn't appear to be too serious. And off they melt into the sand forests of Tembe. It's amazing how they disappear into this thick vegetation. Makes them quite ghost-like. Oh, it's funny how elephants disappeared so rapidly. I hope there were still a few hanging around. We do at least have some nyalas still spending their time. Quite a beautiful specimen of a male there, munching away on the fresh vegetation. It's still growing obviously quite well with its access to water there. Pedro, you'd like to know why is it important for reserves to maintain species diversity? So your species diversity is always very important due to the fact that every single species plays a specific role in the ecosystem. Your grazers, browsers, predators, scavengers, pollinators, decomposers, etc. all help keep the system or nature functioning properly. So the more diverse an ecosystem is, the more resilient it tends to be. If one species declines because of a factor such as drought, disease, or some other challenge, another species can help fill parts of that role, which makes the system less likely to collapse. A good example is if all the scavengers are gone, then you sit with a large amount of bodies that need to be decomposed, etc., and that spreads disease and the knock-on effects. But if there's possibly some other scavengers like hyenas or crows that could maybe fill that void a bit, it does help. But of course it's never as well or efficient as it is done by vultures, but that's just a bit of a simple example. So yeah, a diverse reserve is also usually a healthier reserve. Because your nutrients, your energy, and ecological processes are moving through many different pathways rather than relying on just a few species. It's actually quite interesting. You often hear or see people talk about the damage that elephants cause or the pressure they place on a system, but it's also quite interesting if you go to reserves that maybe historically had elephants before they were reserves or areas, and elephants have been excluded or no longer found in those areas. Those, one would assume the system's quite healthy because there's no elephants, etc., but quite the opposite side of it. There's nothing big breaking down those trees or opening up, allowing grass growth to take place, and we actually refer to it as bush encroachment. So yeah, diversity is quite key. It plays a role, it needs to be managed, etc., but the more diverse a system is, the more resilient it will always be. And that's why at the end of the day, with any reserve or what conservationists focus on, you can't focus on saving one specific animal if it's going to be to the detriment of others. Of course, there's very threatened species that do need to be saved and helped, as long as it's done so in a way that doesn't cause detriment to the rest of the system. It doesn't help you save one animal and you manage to turn your reserve into a desert or ecological desert. And that's what makes conservation often tough at times. Tough decisions need to be made for the greater ecology or the rest of the environment over and above just one animal or species. Quite interesting. Those elephants came and left quite rapidly. I'm sure they were feeding a bit out of view there, and they're probably just on the move. Of course, quite interesting. They're heading in the exact same direction as the cows. So I'm sure those bulls are trying to investigate if there's any females in estrus. But yeah, it just shows you how heightened the senses of an elephant are when it comes to smell, hearing, and obviously also those very low frequency vibrations that they're able to pick up that we as humans are not perceptive to. I do think a lot of the cold weather that's recently gone through South or Southern Africa certainly keeping the animals lying low a little bit. It has been quite a chilly weekend for most of us, but I do think it will start to stabilize or improve from today onwards. But it is interesting to see the effect that it does have on the animals. I noticed this morning in my bird feeders yesterday, they were very quiet. There wasn't much activity, but it's looking a bit more promising today. Quite interesting, these elephants come past at a rate of knots, as if they've got somewhere important to be. Only they will know. It's always very entertaining to see when you can tell the elephant has got somewhere to be. They walk with a very certain sense of urgency, not that slow, peaceful gait of theirs when they're not in a rush. When they need to get somewhere, they can really cover distance effectively. These three also seem to be on their way to somewhere. And that one was in such a rush, he didn't even have time to stop while he dropped off a few parcels there. Got places to be. There's certainly some good bird audio going on in the background. I think I can hear, or I know I can hear a somber greenbill, a little high-pitched whistle. I'm not the best at mimicking bird calls. I'm not a good whistler either, but I can hear him calling in the background. Got a few impala creeping out from the thickets now, making the most of the edible grasses there. Obviously a opening like this is quite a popular spot for all the animals. There's a lot of green vegetation, grass. Obviously there's a lot of underground water, so it's an area that tends to stay greener throughout the year compared to other areas in the reserve. Well, we're gonna hopscotch a little bit and head on back to Victoria Falls, see what's going on that side. The ever magnificent Hadida ibis, or Hadada ibis, however you wish to pronounce it. Quite a synonymous bird with most South Africans. They spend quite a bit of time in gardens and urban areas of South Africa. Quite interesting. It was once upon a time a bit more of a rarer bird, but it was one of the examples of birds that did quite well with human expansion, or urban expansion, maybe that's a better term for it. But essentially, as golf courses, agricultural areas and gardens spread out, so too did the Hadida's home range. But I always find it quite a treat to actually bump into one in a wild area, because they're not very common in the wild, well, in the true rough and tough wild. They do have quite a hideous call, that quite akin to someone screaming, unfortunately, but bit of a core memory. Anyway, our Hadida has disappeared, and we're off to Aldonyo to see quite a tall creature. Yeah, some beautiful, majestic giraffes here at Aldonyo. Always love seeing them with the acacia trees in the background. It was quite funny to hear the impala ratting in the background at Victoria Falls. We're quite deep into the ratting season of the impalas. Probably not the most beautiful sound for such a elegant or peaceful antelope. The giraffe's looking quite peaceful. Ooh, something's given them a bit of a fright there. Be interested to know what that was. I don't think it was something too serious, since it only gave one of them a fright. The others don't seem overly concerned. Miley, you'd like to know if giraffes disperse seeds. So yeah, I don't know if how they would compare maybe necessarily to an elephant. I think the elephant is probably one of the best seed dispersers, also because their digestive tract is not very efficient. So the seeds come out quite unharmed or unaffected. But that being said, seeds are incredibly tough. I don't think a giraffe's digestive tract, or many herbivores for that matter, is an issue. But yeah, as they browse, they'll eat fruit, pods and seeds from a variety of trees and shrubs that they're browsing on. And of course, many of these seeds pass through the digestive system unharmed and are deposited in the giraffe's dung. And because giraffes travel several kilometers or wide distances, they of course help move these seeds across the landscape, allowing plants to colonize new areas, and once again genetic diversity, which is just as important for plants. And it's quite interesting. A lot of plants, especially acacias, are quite well known for that. If you ever try, and I'm just using the word acacia because that's what I'm used to, and I think it's easier and less confusing, but if you ever try grow them at home, you often need to soak them in water for 24 hours, and some people even scarify or scratch the surface, which is said to imitate the digestive system of an animal feeding on the seeds. So, and without this happening, it's actually very hard to germinate the seeds. So it's quite interesting how it's quite a integral and purposeful part of a tree or a seed's germination process. I know elephants are always quite good at looking very peaceful or relaxed while just standing looking off into the distance, but I do think giraffes take the prize. They really do just epitomize elegance while they stare out over the plains. Of course, they do have a really great view, so I think I would also get caught daydreaming the way they do.
At Wild Earth, we believe every story has the power to create change. That's why we've launched the Wild Earth Impact Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to conservation and social impact. By showcasing conservation stories, we can change lives, protect nature, and empower communities. We have partnered with Empowers Africa to accept tax-deductible donations from US donors. Your donation will help fund critical programs that support our mission. Join us and be part of the change.
We are following the story of 32 rhinos that are making their way to their new home at Mabula Private Game Reserve.
We haven't seen Vuli for quite a long time. There's a lioness with 3-day-old cubs that is around here.
Isn't that beautiful?
Those little ones are so playful. Hey guys.
You can really see how big he is.
We know that adverts pay our bills, but you don't necessarily like them. So, this is a fantastic way to stop being interrupted. Sign up today and you'll get instant access to wildlife. 24/7, ad-free, live and on demand. No pesky commercials, no rude interruptions, just wild Africa exactly as it unfolds. Wild Earth Explorers, wilder together.
Yeah, no, definitely. There is quite an unofficial one. It's not obviously written in stone, and it changes from species to species. But generally, the biggest and most dangerous animals tend to get the most space. Always elephants arriving at a waterhole often cause other animals to step aside. Likewise, rhinos, buffalo, and hippos can be quite influential, simply just due to their size and the confidence that this comes with it. But of course, it's not always about size. Predators can change the behavior of everything around them. So sometimes when lions come in, you will even see a herd of elephants flee. Not always, but it just depends on the circumstances of the situation. But generally, might is right at the waterhole, and the biggest animals tend to dominate it. A couple times at Adonio we have seen how when there's a lot of zebra coming in, it's as if eventually even the elephants decide to avoid the situation. I don't know if it's the sheer numbers, maybe the intimidating size of the herd, or all the stripes, etc. But generally the elephants rule the roost. With hippos it's a bit different. Obviously they're already at the waterhole, so they tend to be a bit more possessive of their space and defensive. But yeah, once again, it depends who's coming down. A hippo's not going to challenge an elephant. A couple times at Rosie's, I've seen how the elephants actually go into the waterhole to chase the poor hippo out. Then he needs to go hide in the bushes until they are done. But it's generally young elephant bulls that partake in such activities. Once I also saw a rhino cow being quite aggressive towards an elephant. It's actually quite interesting. The elephant didn't do much, and the rhino cow was very defensive. She did have a calf with her, so that could maybe explain the reaction. Unfortunately, it didn't go well for her, because the elephant will always win in a fight like that. But it depends on so many factors. Sometimes they will go running, and other times they'll stand their ground. But yeah, it's quite interesting to see how waterholes change the demeanor and behavior of a lot of other species. It is always wonderful in the waterholes have got a bit of activity, not too much, just nice and peaceful. One can really sit back and just enjoy the scene. And of course the audio that we're lucky to have from the cameras really just does that extra bit of setting the scene, making it feel like you're right there. Kelly, you'd like to know where would a research collar be placed on a giraffe? Now, not that I've ever seen one myself, but from what I've read and heard, generally if a researcher needs to collar a giraffe, it's usually fitted low on the neck, just above the shoulders, where the neck is at its thickest. Obviously, if it's high up, there's a bit of movement and that can catch on something, or also lead to other issues where if it's low down, it's out of the way, there's not a lot of play with the collar. But in general, normal collar design doesn't work very well with a giraffe. Since its head is much wider than its neck, the collar has to be it's designed to stay in the place without really restricting movement, feeding or swallowing. So up there is not great. That being said, also all the advancements in technology these days, researchers, I actually would say using collars on giraffes is kind of outdated or redundant. So researchers would probably use alternatives such as ear tags, photo identification, drones or GPS devices. It's quite amazing just with photos and artificial intelligence how they're able to map and identify different individuals or counts, etc. So these are a lot less intrusive, but I would not consider myself a specialist in that field, but I can't see why you would necessarily use a collar if you could maybe use a much less intrusive GPS tag. Quite interesting. I think this is the fullest I've actually seen Aldonio in quite a while. Obviously, being an artificial waterhole, it's quite dependent on how much is drinking out of the waterhole, but it is interesting to see a bit of overflow taking place. So it's either been a bit of a quiet day or everyone's still on their way. I wouldn't always necessarily say elephants have the most tact or manners around the waterhole. They're more than happy to poo and peep around it. But once again, it's actually just the cycle of nature, and especially when it comes to herbivores, their dung or excretions are very rarely, if ever, an issue. It's generally more predators, dung or excrement that tends to harbour more pathogens or detrimental microorganisms. I think that the smell of an elephant or elephant dung is always a smell that conjures up the feeling of a safari for me. It's quite indescribable, but it does make you realize you are on safari when you smell it. I wonder what bird that is. It sounds a bit like a roller, or maybe one of the go-away birds. Jess, you were asking if their urine and dung act as a fertilizer to the grass. 100%, you are correct there. So elephant dung and urine, and not just elephants, I mean all your other antelope, it's kind of natural fertilizers, and what we were speaking about earlier with, or we touched on it briefly with nutrient cycling in the ecosystem, but obviously all the nutrients that are taken up when herbivores feed on them, or grasses or trees, that's how it's recycled back into the system. So your nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium chiefly, they go back into the soil, and then it further helps plants grow again. Elephant dung is quite important because it's full of partially digested plant material and seeds. Like I said, their digestive tract is not very efficient at fully breaking up what they feed on, so it tends to come out quite undigested. So in turn, your dung beetles, insects and fungi and other microbes all get to work on breaking it down. So it's quite a powerhouse of an ecosystem for them in turn. And then that further releases nutrients that grasses and other plants can use. And because elephants eat such large quantities of vegetation and the vast distances they travel, they really play an important role in moving nutrients around in the landscape. See, this fellow's splashing himself a little. Actually quite funny because we don't often see the mud bath here at Aldonio, but I guess it's because there's not generally mud lying around. So unless the elephants have managed to construct a bit of a mud bath the last while. I'm always fascinated by how elephants are able to spread mud all over themselves. It's also quite amazing how coated this fellow is now with such a small mud puddle. And quite effective at spreading it all over them. And this poor zebra is so desperate for a sip of water, it's actually come to drink from the puddle on the edge of the pan. But I must say, zebras are not very picky when it comes to water. I saw it the other day in Kruger as well. There was much fresher water nearby in a marsh, yet a herd of zebras elected to drink from quite a muddy pool with a little bit of water left. You often also see the way they rush into a waterhole. They're not too worried if they stir it up. I think elephants, etc., a few other animals are a bit more picky about the quality of the water. And this is pretty much that hierarchy we were talking about. As soon as the elephant left, the zebra have come in. Obviously quite hesitant to approach while he was there. Obviously also it's a relatively small waterhole here at Aldonio, so I think you see it much more. And areas that are a bit larger, it's not such an issue. Brenda, you would like to know what are the benefits of having a stallion and multiple females, and how do the stallions maintain the harem without folding to pressure? So, in general, I think it's a bit more normal. We see it more often than we realize, but anyway, a harem system benefits the stallion and the females, because for the stallion, staying with multiple females increases his chance of passing on his genes numerous times. And for the females or the mares, having a dedicated stallion means there's a familiar male helping to watch out for predators, defend the group from rival males, and keep the family together. Obviously he would have fought to lead it, so the females also know he's the best suitor for that. Yeah, the stallion, I don't think it's easy leading or maintaining a harem by any means. It's generally a combination of vigilance, experience, and persistence rather than constant fighting, although there is a fair chunk of fighting that does take place. It's not easy to be the king on top of the hill. So yeah, the stallion will spend a lot of time monitoring the mares, positioning himself between them and rival males, and herding them back if they wander too far, and of course, if need be, keeping or fighting and chasing off any would-be suitors or challengers. But it is quite interesting. Most of the work is preventative, and a good stallion is able to avoid many confrontations simply because other males can recognize that the harem is already well defended and protected. Also looks like quite a windy, overcast day in Kenya. Can relate to that all too well yesterday. I battened down the hatches and escaped the worst of the weather. It's not necessarily pleasant to be outdoors when the wind is howling. Sunray, entertaining nickname. You'd like to know, giraffe, the only hooved animals that get overgrown hooves. So no, they're definitely not the only hooved animal that can get overgrown hooves. It's any hooved animal is capable of developing overgrown hooves if the rate of growth exceeds the rate of wear. But of course, this is generally only seen in domestic animals, or same with wild animals. If they're kept in captivity, you'd only really see it in wild animals if they may be old, injured, have a bit of an abnormal gait, and aren't moving enough to wear the hooves down naturally. But yeah, an animal with overgrown hooves in the wild would be, I would say it shouldn't happen. There's a reason if it does happen, and it comes down to not, they're just not wearing it down as much. I think maybe off the bat, if you look at a giraffe's hoof, it maybe appears to be overgrown, but it's purely just the size of the hoof, and it's quite a large load-bearing foot, so I think it appears to be quite big, etc. But I myself have never come across a giraffe, or any animal really for that matter, in the wild with an overgrown hoof.
Hi, I'm Cedric Dold, Wild Earth presenter and private guide. I'd love you to join me on safari. In September, I'll be at Walgevonden for a beautiful spring safari. And in November, I'll be tracking Wild Earth's famous leopards here in the Sabi Sands. Come and share the wildlife, the stories, and the adventure with me. Book now and let's go on safari.
The Wild Earth Impact Foundation is a non-profit that uses the power of wildlife storytelling as a force for good. We create sustainable development projects that showcase conservation stories, empower people, and inspire environmental action. As a registered South African PBO, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Wild Earth Impact Foundation. To find out more, visit our website.
When the Mara turns green, life surges, the air hums, the earth stirs, and the wild comes alive. Here, the wonder never ends. It just changes color. Every storm, every sunrise, every sweeping vista is an expression of wild magic. Visit the Masai Mara. Experience the magic. Sign up today and you'll get instant access to wildlife. You'll also have access to our post-produced content, like a Wild Bush Week. Textbooks tell us that a ratio of 3-to-1 hyenas drive off lionesses. Safari Live Catch-Up.
We have got some doggies that are on the hunt.
And even that sort of cult favorite, The Wild Show. And the little one has made it out. Hopefully will rejoin the herd. Wild Earth Explorers. Wilder. Together. We know that adverts pay our bills, but you don't necessarily like them. So, this is a fantastic way to stop being interrupted. Sign up today and you'll get instant access to wildlife. 24/7, ad-free, live and on demand. No pesky commercials, no rude interruptions, just wild Africa exactly as it unfolds. Wild Earth Explorers, wilder together.
Drinking that water that's freshly coming in. It's quite entertaining. Must confess, it's quite a bit like a trance sitting here just watching the world go by. It's such a peaceful way to spend a Sunday. Also lucky I at least also have a few birds outside and the bird bath in front of my office. But truly a treat on a Sunday just to watch nature do its thing. Ooh, there's a warthog. We don't often see warthogs at Aldonio. I don't think I've recalled seeing a warthog come past here. Obviously, with the lions in the area, it's not easy to be a warthog in this part of the world. Vernon, happy Father's Day to you as well. You'd like to know how has fatherhood changed the way you show up as a guide or nature enthusiast? I think, obviously my daughter's still quite young, but I think since becoming a father has been trying to show her the smaller things, and you kind of slow down. It's not always necessarily about the big things, but just taking it easy, slowing down a bit, and just enjoying the spectacle you find yourself in. And no matter where you are, there is something to look at or enjoy. I find myself not necessarily doing such long game drives, generally a lot more shorter game drives, just to specific spots that are maybe quite pretty for me or attractive, instead of covering vast amount of distance. I've also learned to be that you can't necessarily always stop at each sighting for as long as you want and spend hours on end there. So yeah, I think in a way it's taught me definitely just to enjoy the smaller things and find beauty or value in everything. We'll see how that goes. I'm heading to the Western Cape for a 2-week family vacation. We're going to go look for lots of birds and wildlife in the Karoo and the fynbos of Cape Town. I'm also doing a bit of pelagic birding, but that's going to be quite a shift for the normal low-veld lifestyle here, where it's all generally about the Big Five and the Kruger National Park. So I'm looking forward to a bit of change of scenery. But I'm sure there's many people watching the show that can attest to how your view on nature, etc., changes quite a bit once you have children or you become a father. I do think one thing that's become quite cardinally important for me is just spreading awareness about nature and a love and a desire to look after and protect it. I think that's incredibly important that we pass on to the younger generations, a love and appreciation for nature. It's not something to be tamed, but something to be admired, protected and looked after. I think if we can do that as a generation, the planet will be in a much better trajectory. I see we've also got a few impala slinking in at the back there. So it's actually one of the more diverse days we've had here at Aldonio. Normally there's only a few dominant species around at the waterhole. It's quite nice to see the diversity rolling in. A few birds also hopping in. It's always a bit challenging to see them properly here at Aldonio. They look like some wood doves or doves, and the ever-present oxpeckers on the giraffes. There's often quite a few interesting birds that slink in here at Aldonio without being noticed. There's our pied wagtail again. Quite a cute little busy bird. just watching the oxpeckers jump on the giraffe, I'd be very curious as a person to know what it feels like having an oxpecker clamber about on you or on your hair, etc. I think I did listen to a podcast of a very well-known ornithologist. I think there was a bird sanctuary where there was maybe some oxpeckers, and if you walked into the aviary, they were known for combing through your hair or climbing onto your head and searching for ectoparasites. But I can imagine that's quite an entertaining one. I would relish the experience. I think their claws on your skin is maybe a bit, maybe not pleasant. I don't think it would be painful or inflict any harm. Might just be a bit uncomfortable. But it would be interesting to know what it feels like for some of the animals. I think we would then understand their reactions a bit better. Shayna, you are saying if giraffes are vulnerable, why are they not protected from being preyed upon? That's an interesting question. So when conservationists refer to giraffes being vulnerable, I'd also just like to point out in southern Africa, giraffes the population is quite stable and not of concern. It's quite well represented, through various reserves and national parks, private and public. But yeah, we're talking about the conservation status of species, not about individuals being protected from from predators. So they're not necessarily vulnerable to predators, they're vulnerable to other effects of mankind. So predation by lions is completely natural, and there's of course only lions that would prey on giraffes. Also, it's not a super common occurrence. It has to be the right circumstances, size of a pride, etc. But yeah, it's a natural part of the ecosystem, and of course it has shaped giraffe behavior for millions of years. It's not something new, with giraffes being preyed upon by lions, and that's not why they are vulnerable. What conservationists are more concerned about are human-caused threats, such as habitat loss, fencing, poaching, and the fragmentation of these populations. So in a healthy ecosystem, predators taking giraffe, especially generally calves, older animals, or weakened individuals, it's quite a normal process that helps maintain the ecological balance, the flow of nutrients, etc. A lot of animals depend on that. So if you prevented that or stopped it from happening, it would have quite, I think, serious knock-on effects throughout the ecosystem. And it would maybe get a bit top-heavy, because all of a sudden you would end up with too many giraffes that the system could no longer sustain, and inadvertently you'd probably have a bit of a mass die-off eventually due to a lack of food, spread of disease, etc. So there's when conserving animals, unless it's incredibly dire, when there's maybe only a handful of individuals left, then it's more of a hands-on situation to try set it up. But of course the goal at the end of the day is to restore an endangered animal's numbers so that it can go about its life naturally in the wild and sustain itself, that humans are not involved the entire time. It's just kind of a helping hand in the right direction. I must say, I was thinking the weather at El Doño looked a lot more pleasant than what's happening currently in South Africa, but it also appears there's a bit of a weather system moving around in that part of the world. The sky does look somewhat grayer, and the wind has certainly peaked up a bit since we've been watching the animals here. But of course quite natural for this time of year in the dry season. Of course weather is a bit more different in Kenya compared to the extreme south of the continent I find myself in. If I'm not mistaken, I think today is also the winter solstice, which is quite cool. So that means we've reached the middle of winter in the southern hemisphere, of course. Even our giraffes are slowly but surely moving off. Oh, no, there we go. A nice pachyderm to keep us busy again. It's always amazing on these cooler, windier days how the activity of animals is definitely decreased. Of course, when it's not so hot, there's not a need to drink as much water. Apologies for that, we've just come over to Victoria Falls. These kudus coming in. Nice to see kudus. I think we've almost seen the entire antelope contingency, only really missing wildebeest today. Bird-wise it looks quite consistent. The weather certainly looks very appealing in Zimbabwe at Victoria Falls at the moment. Almost want to take out the sun chair and sunbathe a bit. It's interesting though. Animals certainly look quite careful of how they drink here at Victoria Falls with the crocodiles on the water here. You can see a few elephant tracks spread throughout there. Quite a large herd of impala here. Also a few guinea fowl. So it all appears to be quite calm. I know earlier when we were here and we moved off the male impala were rutting. Oh, there we go. There's still a bit of a display from this male. I think there's a few males nearby causing chaos, and he might investigate or just keep an eye out. But yeah, it's quite a striking sound from such a peaceful antelope. First time I heard it as a child, I thought lions had caught something or were attacking something.
Alright then, let me show you what you're missing. Our archive allows you to delve into the past, be it yesterday or many years ago. You can visit characters who've left us.
Doesn't ever get old.
This is, of course, the Little Prince, Hosanna, guides who've moved on to other things.
Tingana's walking right in front of my vehicle.
These guys are the sausage tree pride.
Classic stories and wonderful moments. Wild Earth Explorers, wilder together.
Would you like to know the difference between a male and a female wildebeest? You can ask me questions like this in real time. Our safaris are live and interactive here in the heart of Africa. Join me on Safari Live and connect with nature.
They're all by themselves, and you can see she's looking around. Happy Steve, happy team.
Very happy.
Yeah.
And he's slowly making his way towards us.
That's it, Dad.
That's it.
We know that adverts pay our bills, but you don't necessarily like them. So, this is a fantastic way to stop being interrupted. Sign up today and you'll get instant access to wildlife. 24/7, ad-free, live and on demand. No pesky commercials, no rude interruptions, just wild Africa exactly as it unfolds. Wild Earth Explorers, wilder together.
So to end of today's show, unfortunately the cam at Old Daniel also had a bit of an issue with the feed. We'll more than likely finish off here today, but at least there's quite a bit of action to enjoy the last bit. Also some great bird audio in the background. Very peaceful, nice way to enjoy a Sunday. So it's very interesting for me. Oh, there's a warthog as well. Just comparing the shape of impala horns throughout different parts of Africa, or southern Africa. See, these ones look, well, these males look quite a bit different. Bit of aggression taking place there. The young boar is not keen on sharing the area with that other warthog. I can also only imagine it's possibly a younger boar. Probably a bit more kinder if it was another sow. But, you know, warthogs can get into quite aggressive fights with each other. And of course also very vocal. It's they've got quite a piercing pig scream, as many other pigs do. Shana, you're more than welcome. I hope you and others enjoyed the show. It's always a great session on a Sunday. But I also hope everyone has a pleasant week ahead, and this afternoon's drive is hopefully filled with lots of wonderful sights. But again, from my side, I hope all the fathers out there have a wonderful Father's Day further. And yeah, it's a quieter session, but there's always lots of beauty in the bush for us to enjoy, and many things to ponder about. So from my side, thanks very much to everyone,